First up is Rob Hersov. Rob's a extraordinary South African, as people who are prepared to put their heads above the parapet today, or even now, they're finding that there's a little bit of flack. When Rob did that at BNC2, our second BizNews conference for the first time, he didn't just draw flack, he drew howitzers. And the consequence of that, though, I truly believe has been a change in the conversation in South Africa. Because up to that point, it was almost like nobody wanted to open their mouths. Well, there are quite a few people who are opening their mouths now, and part of the reason is Rob Hersov, who knew exactly what he was doing. Rob knows he comes from a background of privilege. He knows that his parents, his father and his grandfather were pioneers here in South Africa. They established Anglo-Vol at one of our great companies. And he knew when he opened his mouth, he was going to get attacked. But he could do it because he's a Harvard MBA and he's created serious businesses internationally. So, he made his money offshore and then decided to come back to South Africa. Rob's always worn his heart on his sleeve, and we look forward to welcoming him as our opening speaker today.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you, everyone. Alec said I mustn't, as is natural for me, wander around while I'm speaking because the cameras are fixed and the audio will go off if I wander over there. So I'm going to try and stay still, which is not easy. So I just sort of quickly say congratulations to BizNews on their 10th year anniversary. What Alec has built is amazing. And I am so proud to have BizNews based in Hermanus now. It's even better. This emigration has happened with a great business like Alec's. I'm also very proud to have my oldest son, Alex, here, who's based in Los Angeles, and he's here sitting in the front row. Very proud to have him here. I have thousands of children, but he's my oldest and my eldest son. Alec asked me to be positive, to try and give a positive view today, which I think is a good thing, because there are a lot of positives about South Africa, even today, under this ANC misrule. But I had really struggled to think about positives. And before I begin my presentation, for which I haven't really prepared, because I'm as surprised as you about what comes out of my mouth. And I always listen to my speeches afterwards because I can never remember what I said. And I think, well, that was pretty good. Or how did I come up with that? Who knows what's going to happen, okay? The two great compliments that I've had since I began my unexpected and unwanted role as an activist, a capitalist activist, not really a political activist, but an activist for the good of the country. The two great compliments I've had, one from my father, who said he's never been more proud of me for saying and doing what other people can't afford to say and do. But the second great compliment came from Gwede Mantashe, that old Madala who should have been retired 20 years ago, who's completely useless, who said to me, "Why doesn't Rob Hersov behave like other business people?" And to me, that's a great compliment, because even though there is no end to my anger and distaste for the ANC and how they are breaking and stealing this beautiful country to death, I reserve a special place in hell for those business leaders in this country who are not standing up and speaking truth to power. And I do name names here. I do name names. And there's been an initiative recently, led by that appeaser, that Marshall Patan, that Macmillan called Martin Kingston. Whenever I see his name, I don't trust whatever's happening. He's so far up the ANC's you-know-what, that in Churchill's words, his description of an appeaser is the person who feeds the crocodile, hoping he will be eaten last. And that is Martin Kingston, major appeaser. He has formed this initiative, or led this initiative, of great business leaders. And there's Sasol, Standard Bank, Remgro, and many others in it, who will be working with government to try and fix this country. So the ANC government breaks, steals, and destroys and business is going to help them fix the problem. Okay? So I read this and I go, this doesn't make sense to me. Why solve the problems these people are creating and give them credit for it? Isn't that propping up the ANC in the next election? But then amongst those business leaders, cowards, colluders, I saw a name of a man I respect greatly, Neil Froneman. And I went, I'm missing something. If Neil's in there, this must be something good about this initiative. So I asked if he'd call me. He called me yesterday, and I said, Neil, what am I missing here? You know, I can understand the other big businesses joining this initiative to try and pretend to all of you they're doing a good job. See, we're trying to work to fix things, you know? Sasol, Remgro, Standard Bank, yeah, right. But Neil's in there, and I know Neil's the real deal. And he called me and said, Rob, the reason I've joined this is we've got to a point where this country is in such a mess, we have to do something. Even if we have a year or 8 months to the election, we actually have to do something. We have to make an effort. But the conditions that I'm putting in there, Neil Froneman, am inserting into this work with government, those conditions are going to continue beyond the next government. So this is an initiative that's going to go for the long term. I still don't trust the fact Martin Kingston's leading it. So let me get on to my positive speech for the 10th year anniversary of BizNews. You might recognize the beginning. It's not quite the same. I couldn't find many positive things to say about the country right now, but I had a dream. And in my dream, we were in 2025, 2020. I couldn't quite work out where it was in the dream. But the ANC were not in charge. They were not running the country. There was a coalition. And I couldn't quite see who the president was, but it could well have been Herman Mashaba. It might have been John Steenhuisen, or was it Musi Maimane? I couldn't quite see who was the president. But it was a good person, a pro-West, capitalist, libertarian, believer in democracy, believer in the rule of law, someone who really believed in our country. It could well have been Herman. And around that president were members of cabinet, a much smaller cabinet, mind you. We didn't have a minister of electricity. We didn't have these random ministers with people that do nothing and also don't know what they're doing, our current cabinet. And these people were experts. You know, I think the Minister of Law and Order of Police was Ian Cameron. It looked like Ian, that jaw, that fearless, that courage. Oh, there he is over there. And in every position were people with skills and competence, and under them, in the next level, were people of skills and competence. And the country was growing. It was growing at 8% a year. Kenya's at 5%. We were growing at 8% a year. So it couldn't have been too far in the future, because this country will turn around very, very quickly under the right government and under the right management. And I saw foreign direct investment pouring in, because there is today a wall of money wanting to come into this country in every sector. But it's not coming in because they know the ANC is a socialist, ineptocratic, kleptocratic organization, have put rules in place, over-regulated from a socialist and leftist point of view, making life impossible for investors to come into this country. Take Elon Musk's Starlink. We can bring Wi-Fi to the rural settlements, to the homeless areas today, if it weren't for the BEE regulation, which I've said is theft. And even Penn, Black Penn, who's in the room, great friend of mine, a great podcaster, sitting here with his beautiful wife, even Penn said BEE has failed. We know it's failed. Therefore, why not get rid of it? So there's a ton of foreign direct investment ready to come in every single sector. And it'll come in from India, Australia, Germany, France, America, Canada. It'll come in from South America, from Israel, from Poland. Ready to come in, but not coming in today because of the ridiculous overregulation, the racial bias to all the laws, the weakening of property rights with EWC, which is theft, and all the incompetence and mismanagement and socialist ideology of the ANC. But in my dream, foreign direct investments pouring in. We're growing at 8%. We've got employment booming. Our unemployment rate is falling from wherever you believe it is, 40 to 60%. I mean, Gigi Alcock will tell you it's lower than we think it is because of the Kazanomics in the townships, the extraordinary entrepreneurial activity in the townships, the informal economy, how strong that is. He'll tell you about that later. But I believe that in my dream, I could see unemployment coming down to in the low 20s, falling towards 10%, which in this country is probably full employment. And most interesting of all, of the million South Africans that have left this country, and I reckon half the people in this room, as children, mine included, live overseas. And I applaud that. Why stay here if the ANC government's going to destroy this country? We need to fix this country for them to return. And of the million South Africans that have gone abroad, who've been hugely successful because they know they probably won't come back. They have to succeed overseas. And when people say, why are South Africans so successful abroad and Australians and New Zealanders not as such? And the simple reason is because when you leave, you cut the cord. You burn the boats, so you can't return. You have to succeed overseas. And as I've always said, there are 34, 35 South African dollar billionaires living overseas and only 5 or 6 living in South Africa. Isn't that extraordinary? The 2 richest people in Los Angeles were born in South Africa. Elon Musk and Patrick Soon-Shiong, number 1 and number 2. And city by city around the world, you'll find the same thing. But in my dream, I see 100 to 200,000 of these people, mostly young, qualified, trained, with contacts and capital, returning home to build our build our country. And I see a country that is digitized, where we have Starlink without 30% BE in it. We have Starlink in South Africa, and we have people who haven't had access to education, no matter where they live, no matter whether they have access to a classroom or not, having access to world-class education. World-class education. Why sit in a room where you have a teacher that hasn't been given proper training, isn't properly incentivized, isn't properly paid, is treated as a second-class citizen, in a rough area, teaching children when you can have the greatest educators in the world online teaching our children? One of the greatest destroyers of the apartheid era was the education system. At its worst point, white kids got 18 times more money from the education budget than black kids. And the worst legacy of apartheid is that we have a whole generation, which basically includes our cabinet, which have not been educated, are fundamentally stupid, and believe socialism hasn't been tried properly. And I had a chat at a drinks last night with a lovely journalist, I won't mention her name, who I suspect thinks socialism hasn't been tried properly. And that's very, very stupid, I have to say. We know communism doesn't work, and we know socialism doesn't work, so let's not pretend it does. And in my dream, I also saw, because of the positive growth, the tilt towards the West in South Africa, the rejection of Russia, the rejection of China and their bribes, and the country booming, Mnangagwa in Zimbabwe gets overturned, collapses, and Vincent Chamisa, who's another Hichilema of Zambia, and another great leader, I've forgotten his name, of Malawi, Lazarus, is that right? Close. Great leader like that. Vincent Chamisa comes into power in Zimbabwe, and of the 2, 3, 4 million Zimbabweans here, half of them go home. They've loved being in South Africa. They've been very grateful. They've all done very well, but they've decided to go home. And Zimbabwe takes off and grows at 10%. 2 great economies in Southern Africa booming. And this is my dream. And it's not an impossible dream. It's a dream that's an inch away. It's 8 to 10 months away if we can get the ANC out of power. If Action SA, the DA, Inkatha, VF Plus, and other parties, including the Patriotic Alliance, do come together in the Moonshot Pact, or whatever it's called, the Rainbow Coalition, and defeat the ANC in the polls at the election. But to do so, we need some things to happen. It's not just political parties that are going to win the day for us. It's not just these people putting their egos aside and working together to remove the cancer of the ANC from this country. It's civil society too. And sitting in this room, and I've got to point him out, is Michael Louis. Michael, put your hand up there. 6 years ago at a drinks party in Constantia, my wife and I were chatting to him, and we knew him through his in-laws, his in-laws, 2 Springbok rugby players in that family, correct? Or was it 3? 2. The Pickards. He said to me, I'm going to change the Electoral Act in this country. And I said to my wife, I think he's been drinking too much. Let's go. And if you followed the progress of what he does, he needs eternal praise for what he has done to unite all the civil associations in this country, to change the Electoral Act in this country, to ensure that independent candidates can run for election and are not disincentivized financially and in terms of the ratio of seats they can get. The work he is doing is fundamental and incredibly important. So well done, Michael. So 1, political parties working together. 2, civil society, which is way stronger in this country than most people realize. And organizations like AfriForum doing an incredible job every day, day in and day out. 3rd is business. And this is the one where I feel we're being let down terribly. More and more business people are speaking out. Good for Sim Shabalala, good for Kaz Kavudia, good for Pullinger, good for Gareth Ackerman recently. You know, numerous people have actually stood up and spoken out against what's going on. But too many business leaders are the silence of the lambs. They're not doing what they should be doing. They're not standing up and making things happen. And I call them out because when the change comes, like during the Second World War, every Frenchman was part of the resistance. You remember that? Every single Frenchman fought for the resistance. Yeah, right. We will remember those business people that stood up, took it on the chin like Neil Froneman, and those that didn't, or those that were the appeasers like Martin Kingston. But we also need entertainers, athletes, podcasters. We need all the influencers in this country to come together and just tell the truth. I'm not asking for anything more than tell it like it is. Speak truth to power like Jan does, like Ian does, like Herman does, like Penn does. Tell the truth. We know South Africa's going backwards. We know things are falling apart. The fact that Alec has moved to Hermanus, that semigration is in floods now, it's very simple what's happening. The ANC are incompetent and unable to run a sophisticated economy, and they have broken every single state-owned enterprise. Every single state-owned enterprise. And for those of you who still believe Cyril Ramaphosa is a reformer, for those of you who still believe that, the greater fool you. For those who believe he is not pushing forward with the NDR, the National Democratic Revolution, for those who believe he's not part of the RET, the greater fool you. He is just a smoother, silkier, more evil way of pushing the socialist agenda forward. And it is happening. At best, he should be reading the news on SABC, which he did in the COVID introductions. That's all that man is good for. He has never done anything in his life that he's truly deserved. He was given his money as a BEE tenderpreneur. He has not earned his stripes. And he is a sneaky, spineless, and useless human being pushing a socialist agenda on all of us. Wake up, South Africa. Wake up, the Martin Kingstons, and stop kissing Cyril's ass. He is the enemy. So, on that note, how do we make this thing happen? Politics has got to come together. Civil society has got to come together. Athletes, entertainers, and influencers got to come together. We need the business community to stand up even further, and we need people to register and vote. And that's another matter that Michael and Skulk Kearney, where's Skulk? Skulk are working on very, very diligently, and that is your vote counts. We need to tell the young people, the 18 to 25-year-olds, who either have given up on politics, are cut full, don't care, or too lazy to actually get up in the morning and register and vote. We need them to vote because 10% of that large registration and population base aren't voting. And if we can get them to vote, they will not vote for the ANC. They were not born during apartheid, and they can see clearly how useless the ANC are. So I've got 54 seconds, and I wrote all these notes down and never looked at them. And I've got some wonderful quotes in here and some lovely things to say. And I have an idea that we can create a reconstruction bond which can fund this country's reformation and reconstruction. And I'll put that idea to you maybe during the Q&A. But on that note, I had a dream, and I wish that dream could come true because I hate waking up to the nightmare of the ANC. Thank you.